After nearly 4 decades, the loved ones of a slain Colorado man finally received the justice they had long been seeking. On November 21, 1985, 51-year-old Roger Dean became the victim of a tragedy so horrific it could have been lifted from the pages of a crime novel. A man, concealed by a ski mask, forcibly entered Roger's home in Lone Tree, Littleton, Colorado, where he brutally compelled Roger to tie up his wife, Doris Jean DJ Dean, and silence her with duct tape. The assailant demanded $30,000 from their savings account, but when Roger attempted to flee, the intruder mercilessly ended his life. Left behind at the scene were a backpack and an orange ski mask, which Roger had managed to tear from the perpetrator's head. According to witnesses, the assailant fled the scene and ran down the street, eventually getting into a car that sped off. Early on, there were puzzling aspects to the case that perplexed investigators. Roger bore twine marks on only one wrist, indicating he had likely not been tied up as the gunman had purportedly forced him to do. Furthermore, though Roger had been wearing contact lenses at the time of his death, his glasses were discovered in an upstairs bedroom, strangely covered with duct tape. Sergeant Anthony Spurlock of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department believed these discrepancies were deliberate red herrings designed to create the illusion that Roger had been bound and blindfolded. He theorized, "We believe Roger may have hired an individual to stage his kidnapping, withdraw the money, and then report the robbery as a means of keeping the $30,000 for himself." As the investigation progressed, police unearthed an unsettling revelation. Roger had secretly withdrawn nearly $30,000 from his business and stashed it in an undisclosed account. DJ, however, stood firmly by her husband, insisting he could never have orchestrated such a plot. "In my heart, I cannot believe Roger had anything to do with this," she said. "This is the man I was married to for 26 years. Yes, we had problems in the past year, especially after the loss of our son, but I knew him too well to believe he was capable of this." DNA samples from the ski mask were collected, but at the time, the limitations of forensic science left the case cold. It wasn't until 5 years later, July 21, 1990, that DJ and their daughter, Tamara, received an anonymous letter from a person claiming to be Roger's killer. The letter demanded $150,000, insisting it was owed to him, and threatened further violence if his demands were not met. The letter ominously read, "Do you know that I have met your daughter Tammy on a few occasions? Do not make me end her. Your son is deceased. Your husband is deceased. Do not risk your daughter. She is the last one left." The authorities were convinced the letter was genuine and linked it to Roger's killer. The writer claimed he would call again in 6 days. On July 27th, DJ and Tamara were placed under round-the-clock protection. FBI agents moved into the house, setting up a wiretap. When the man called, as he had promised, he revealed that Roger owed him money and insisted that DJ pay the sum of $150,000. The FBI traced the call to a payphone in Denver, but by the time they arrived, the caller had vanished. Over the next several months, the extortionist continued to call DJ, demanding the money and offering cryptic instructions on where to deliver it. One day, he told her to drive to a supermarket 20 miles north of her home and wait for further instructions. DJ, aided by the FBI, attempted to entrap the man by concealing agents in her car and surrounding the area with surveillance teams. Finally, the caller told her to leave the money in an alley behind an apartment complex in downtown Denver. On August 19, 1990, DJ made the drop as instructed, but the FBI waited in vain until dawn, and the man never appeared to collect the money. Special Agent Bob Pence of the Denver FBI speculated that the perpetrator, possibly alerted to the law enforcement presence, had either gotten cold feet or been too frightened to make the pickup. In his final phone call, the extortionist made a chilling threat against Tamara. He claimed that he would strike when she least expected it. The authorities knew very little about the suspect, other than that he was white, about 6 feet tall, and spoke with an unusually extensive vocabulary. Strangely, there was a conflicting report from a 9-year-old girl, Carly Gibson, who insisted the man had been black. As time passed, the case slowly went cold, and the statute of limitations had expired without any major breakthroughs. 13 years later, in 2003, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, entered the case into a national database, but no matches surfaced. Another 15 years would pass before further advancements in DNA testing allowed investigators to enter a new analysis. By 2020, an investigator specializing in DNA genealogy had traced the likely parents of the perpetrator, whose family had 2 sons. For DJ, however, the years of waiting became unbearable, and tragically, she took her own life in 2020, 7 months before genetic evidence would finally link the perpetrator to the crime scene. After decades of technological progress in DNA testing, law enforcement connected the suspect to the scene through items left behind, the backpack and the ski mask. The focus shifted to 2 brothers, one of whom, Michael Chanel Jefferson, boarded a flight from Los Angeles to New Orleans. During the flight, Jefferson discarded a plastic water bottle, which was intercepted by detectives. The DNA found on the bottle matched the samples collected from the ski mask at the crime scene. This crucial discovery led investigators to believe that Jefferson was indeed the perpetrator. In addition to the DNA evidence, an investigator who had been on the same flight with Jefferson also recognized similarities between Jefferson's voice and the phone calls made by the extortionist. Michael Jefferson was arrested on March 23, 2021, and extradited from Los Angeles to Colorado. On August 6, 2024, Jefferson, now 67 years old, pleaded guilty in a plea bargain. On January 16, 2025, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison for the murder of Roger, with credit for more than 3 years of time already served. Although it was the maximum sentence, the district attorney in Douglas County believed that Jefferson could be paroled in as little as 8 years. Tamara, Roger's daughter, voiced her frustration with Jefferson's lack of accountability. "I've been sitting behind him for 4 years," she said. "His expression has remained unchanged the entire time. He seems emotionless. He does not take any accountability. It's as though he doesn't care." She added, "He could have done a lot for me and a lot for himself if he had just explained why he did what he did and offered an apology. At the very least, a recognition would have been helpful. I have no respect for him whatsoever." Given the prolonged trial delays and the scandal surrounding DNA mishandling within the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Tamara remarked, "I think it's a good thing Mom wasn't here to witness this. If she wasn't already deceased, this process would have destroyed her." The DNA test that ultimately confirmed Jefferson's involvement was also the reason he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, conspiracy to commit murder, instead of the original, more severe charges. Former forensic scientist Ivan Missy Woods had worked on the case, but after she was found to have manipulated DNA evidence in several other cases, prosecutors decided that the risk of going to trial was too great, even though Jefferson's DNA was later confirmed by an independent lab. Investigators suggested that a potential motive for Jefferson's actions may have been his relationship with a woman who was an employee of Roger's. He may have believed Roger was wealthy and thought he could profit from him. Finally, after years of waiting, the mystery of Roger's death was solved, but the pain of loss and the quest for justice had lingered far too long for those left behind. At 6:20 a.m. on August 9, 1976, a truck driver named Martin Duran stumbled upon the lifeless bodies of a young man and woman. In a state of urgency, Martin reached out to Charles Graham, a local store employee, who promptly notified the authorities. Both individuals had suffered gunshot wounds to the upper chest. Initially, the male victim was estimated to be between 18 and 22 years of age. However, a forensic dentist later assessed his dental records and revealed that he was actually over 27, though his youthful appearance was attributed to his attire and physique. The man, of Caucasian descent with an olive skin tone, boasted shoulder-length brown hair, deep brown eyes, and strikingly bushy eyebrows. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing approximately 150 pounds, he bore scars on his shoulders and back, indicative of a history in contact sports. His attire included faded brown Levi's jeans, a vibrant red t-shirt, and a luxurious yellow-gold Bulova Accutron wristwatch. Adorning his finger was a 14-karat gold ring featuring a gray sapphire, engraved with the initials JPF, hinting that his name began with the letter J. The quality of the ring and watch, along with his intricate dental work, suggested he hailed from a well-to-do background. The female victim, appearing younger than her male counterpart, was initially thought to be between 18 and 20 years old. She stood at 5 feet 5 inches, weighed 100 pounds, and shared a similar olive complexion. Speculation arose that the two might be siblings. With her brown, shoulder-length hair and captivating bluish-gray eyes, she had 2 distinctive moles on the left side of her face, near her mouth. Her jewelry consisted of handmade rings, likely of Native American or Mexican origin. The male victim was designated as Jock Doe. A name given after an acquaintance informed investigators that he had introduced himself as Jock a few months prior to the discovery of the bodies, while the female victim was referred to as Jane Doe. In 1977, merely a year after the discovery of the victims, a man was apprehended in Latta, South Carolina, for operating a vehicle under the influence. During the investigation, authorities unearthed a revolver within his automobile, which corresponded to the type utilized in the notorious Sumter County Does case. Subsequent inquiries confirmed that this revolver was indeed the very weapon employed in the heinous act. Regrettably, the owner of the firearm was never charged, as the evidence was deemed insufficient. Investigators also ventured to Brunswick, Georgia, where they encountered a couple who harbored the belief that Jane Doe might be their long-lost daughter. However, upon reviewing photographs of Jane Doe, they conclusively determined that it was not her. Dental analyses further corroborated that the victim was not their child. Speculation arose surrounding Henry Lee Lucas, a notorious criminal, as a potential perpetrator of the murders. Lucas claimed to have been in South Carolina on the day the victims perished, yet his history of fabricating confessions left investigators skeptical, and no tangible evidence ever connected him to the crime. The remains of the victims were preserved at a local funeral home, with the hope that someone might come forward to identify them. Inquiries poured in from across the United States and Canada, including several parents of missing young adults. Alas, no one could provide a name. On August 14, 1977, the victims were laid to rest in a cemetery in Oswego, South Carolina, with hundreds attending the solemn service. Law enforcement managed to raise a modest sum to cover the funeral expenses. Their gravestones bore the inscriptions, "Male Unknown" and "Female Unknown." The tragic Sumter County Does case was later featured in Unsolved Mysteries, Season 7, Episode 14, in 1995. In 2007, the remains were exhumed to extract DNA for further analysis, revealing that the victims were not biologically related. In July 2019, the DNA Doe Project was enlisted to assist in identifying the couple, leading to over $2,000 in donations to facilitate the extraction of viable DNA profiles from bone marrow for genetic genealogy research. By October 2020, comprehensive family trees for the victims had been established. On January 21, 2021, a press conference was convened to reveal the identities of the victims, who were named as Pamela Buckley and James Freund. Pamela, born on December 16, 1951, in Redwood County, Minnesota, was last seen in December 1975 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at the tender age of 24. James Paul Freund entered the world on September 16, 1946, in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and spent his formative years in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. After completing his education at J.P. McCaskey High School, he wed in 1965 and welcomed a daughter into the world. That same year, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, serving at a base in Germany. Tragically, in 1966, James lost his father, and his father-in-law, an employee of the Bulova Watch Company, bestowed upon him a watch engraved with the initials JPF. Upon his return to the United States, James faced the dissolution of his marriage and vanished on Christmas Day 1975, at the age of 29. Heartbreakingly, his mother never learned of his fate, passing away in Mason, Ohio, in 2004, at the age of 77. Investigators surmise that James and Pamela may have crossed paths while hitchhiking, yet the circumstances surrounding their untimely deaths remain shrouded in mystery. Sheriff Anthony Dennis remarked, "It is a privilege to provide the family with some semblance of closure after embarking on this investigation so many years ago. We also intend to reopen the inquiry and pursue a person of interest." Ashley Marie Parlier was quiet, the kind of girl who spoke gently, smiled often, and avoided conflict like it was fire. At 21 years old, she was still figuring out life, still navigating her path. She lived at home with her parents in Battle Creek, Michigan. She didn't party. She wasn't the rebellious type. If anything, she was a people pleaser, the kind of daughter who'd much rather avoid an argument than start one. Ashley had a younger sister, Nicole, who described her as painfully shy, almost too trusting for her good. But Ashley had secrets, and one of them was growing inside her. In early 2005, Ashley discovered she was pregnant. She hadn't told many people. She wasn't in a serious relationship, at least not one that her family knew about. The pregnancy wasn't something she celebrated. It was something she tried to hide, and when the truth finally came out, it didn't go well. Her parents were shocked, disappointed even. Arguments followed. Tension filled the house. One afternoon in June 2005, things reached a breaking point. Ashley and her parents fought. Words were exchanged. Emotions ran high. And then she walked out the front door. No purse, no wallet, no phone, just vanished. She never came back. At first, her family thought maybe she needed space. Maybe she went to stay with a friend or checked into a motel for the night. But when the hours turned into days and no one heard from her, panic set in. Ashley didn't drive. She didn't have money. She was vulnerable, emotionally and physically. And worst of all, she was pregnant. The police were called. A missing persons report was filed. Flyers went up. But leads were scarce. There was no sign of her at bus stations, no hospital admissions in her name. She just disappeared. Her family begged the public for help, but weeks passed, then months, then years. The case went cold. For 16 years, Ashley's family lived in limbo. No closure, nobody, no peace. Her parents died without ever knowing what happened to their daughter. And as time moved on, so did the world. But Ashley's younger sister, Nicole, never stopped searching. She pushed for answers. She kept Ashley's name alive in local media. Still, the silence was deafening. Then, in 2021, everything changed. In an entirely different state, Pennsylvania, police were investigating a man named Harold David Hallman III, a convicted felon with a disturbing past. He was already imprisoned for killing multiple women. But during an interrogation, Hallman dropped a bombshell. He'd murdered a woman in Michigan. Her name? Ashley Parlier. The confession came out casually, like it was just another notch on his belt. Hallman told detectives he'd met Ashley in 2005. They were in a relationship, according to him, something her family had never known. He believed he was the father of her unborn child, and for reasons that still aren't fully clear, he decided she couldn't live. He lured Ashley to a remote area in Newton Township, a wooded stretch of land far from any traffic or homes. He claimed they argued. Then he hit her, over and over with a piece of wood. When she stopped moving, he buried her body in a shallow grave and left her there, like she never existed. Detectives in Michigan were notified. They brought Hallman back for questioning, and he didn't hold back. He even drew a map, trying to help them locate where he'd buried her. But after 16 years, the landscape had changed. Weather, wildlife, and time had erased the exact spot. To this day, Ashley's remains have never been recovered. In February 2023, Harold David Hallman III stood in a Michigan courtroom and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was already serving life sentences for 2 other killings, but this one added 37.5 to 60 years. It didn't bring Ashley back. It didn't fill the hole in her sister's life. But it gave her a name, a truth, a sliver of justice. At the sentencing hearing, Nicole Campen stood up and faced her sister's killer. She didn't hold back. She described the pain of losing Ashley, the years of not knowing, the nights spent wondering if her sister was still alive somewhere, afraid and alone. She called Hallman evil, a predator who targeted vulnerable women and destroyed lives without remorse. And she was right. Hallman's crimes followed a pattern: lonely women, emotional manipulation, sudden violence. He confessed to at least 3 murders, but authorities believe there could be more. He seemed to enjoy the attention. In some cases, he even drew sketches of the women he killed. But in Ashley's case, something felt personal. Maybe it was the pregnancy. Maybe it was a secret relationship. Or maybe it was just another opportunity for him to exert power, to take a life and control the narrative. Even in court, he offered no real apology. No emotion. Just a hollow admission of guilt. Ashley's family has asked that search efforts for her remains continue. They want to bring her home, to bury her properly, to give her the dignity she was denied for nearly 2 decades. But Hallman hasn't been able to pinpoint the burial site. And after all these years, even with drones and cadaver dogs, hope is fading. As for Hallman, he now lives behind bars at the State Correctional Institution, Phoenix, a high-security prison in Pennsylvania. He'll never walk free again. And while that's a small comfort, it doesn't erase the trauma he left behind. In court, Hallman's own family did not speak. They've remained publicly silent, with no statements, no interviews, no expressions of sympathy for Ashley's loved ones. Whether they knew the full extent of his crimes is unclear. But for Ashley's sister, the silence speaks volumes. The date of his sentencing, February 27, 2023, marked the end of a nightmare that began on a warm summer day in 2005. It brought a painful kind of closure. One that confirmed Ashley hadn't just walked away. She hadn't started a new life somewhere else. She was murdered, buried, forgotten by some, but never by those who loved her. Ashley Marie Parlier was more than just a cold case. She was a daughter, a sister, a young woman with dreams, with flaws, with a life that should have stretched far beyond her 21 years. Her story reminds us that not all missing persons walk back through the door. Sometimes, the answers take decades. Sometimes, they come from the mouths of monsters, but justice, even delayed, can still speak. And for Ashley, that voice finally came, after 17 long years of silence.